Ladies and gentlemen, welcome once again to the Packernet Podcast. I am your host and resident panelist, as always, Ryan Schlip. Check us out online, packernet.com. Find me on Twitter, pack_data. Going to have a little bit of fun with some data today. I decided to kind of take some of that DVOA stuff that kind of caught me off guard a little bit. I was just kind of going through it. It was better than I expected, so I figure, you know what? Let's really dig into this and gather all of it, analyze it, et cetera, and see what exactly we're actually talking about here. So take a little closer look at that. By the way, shout out to all the other Packers content creators who are listening today. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Every once in a while you kind of notice something and you think, it could be a coincidence or whatever. But I swear, this past week or so, my podcast goes out at 4 a.m. and by 9 or 10 o'clock, like verbatim, word for word, what I've been saying on the podcast, all of a sudden everybody just happened to realize on the same day. It's amazing. Exact same revelations using the exact same terminology that I use. So appreciate you guys tuning in. I really do. And look, information's information. It doesn't matter who you hear it from. I'm just saying, why not get it firsthand instead of the next day from everybody else after they hear it? But I figure before we spend a lot of time on this, because I know a lot of people are going to roll their eyes and say, well, why? I don't care about that stat or whatever. Same thing we do with PFF or whatever, because we like to pick and choose what we like and what we don't like. But the fact of the matter is there is some objective truth to some of these things. So we might as well really spend at least a little bit of time talking about DVOA. And kind of getting because there's two kind of competing things. Well, technically three. We're going to be looking at weighted because I think weighted is more important. It's actually interesting to look at the Packers, and you can see when you go from their DVOA ranks in any category to weighted. A lot of times for the Packers, especially recently, weighted is always better. The Packers have basically, since Matt LaFleur's been here, been a team that gets hot at the right time. It's an important thing, and if you want to critique the coaching or are considering moving in a different direction as far as coaching, there are certain things that you need to recognize that this team is doing very well. One of them is getting hot at the right time, which they've done basically every year. But I'm using weighted, so that's, we can talk a little bit about why that's important, although that seems relatively intuitive. But then the other two things that are being used are the rank, which is to say rank within a given year. So the Packers rank fourth in this category. And then also the actual DVOA value. So like 28.5%. So understanding what those actually mean. But before we even get to that, I do want to do kind of an overview of what DVOA is and how DVOA comes to its values and conclusions and whatnot. So yes, if you're wondering, I went to the robot to help me kind of break this down into layman's terms and structure it in a way that is structured. So DVOA, I know we've gone over this, but everybody, including myself, needs a refresher. Every once in a while I go through, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. It does that too, doesn't it? It stands for Defense Adjusted Value Over Average. Sounds complicated. As I've said before, defense adjusted essentially means based on the opponents you've played. We've talked about that. Value over average is talking about how much better are you than the average team. And average is something that's somewhat constructed by DVOA. It's not actually picking which team is the most average and then going off of that. In fact, average isn't based on a team at all. It's based on kind of leads into how DVOA is calculated. Essentially, what we already have is a massive database of every single play that's ever happened. And so when you say it is 3rd and 12 from your own 44-yard line, there is a database that says, here is the typical result. And essentially what they do is they say, okay, but what about against this defense? And whether you underperform, meet, or exceed the expectations essentially gets added up over time. And so if you have a negative 10 passing DVOA, that means you are 10% worse than expected throughout the season, which you could further go on to say in a given situation, if we were able to pause a game and, it's 3rd and 12, the typical pickup is 10 yards on a 3rd and 12. The Packers are 10% worse. Presumably, maybe it's a little bit more complicated than this, but just for the sake of basic illustration, because it's not that important that we get this granular, but 10% worse of 10 yards would be 1 yard less, so you would expect the Packers to get, based on their DVOA, 9 yards. And if they did get 9 yards, that would be negative 10%. If they got the full 12 yards, that would be 20%, positive 20%. All right? And so average team is essentially looking at historic data mixed with 2024 talent, I guess, or adjusting for, or whatever. I don't know. So I really do like DVOA because it's hard to find a better metric between, stats that tend to lack a lot of context. This is a stat that is filled with context. In fact, it's a stat that is built on context. It uses every single snap of every single play in the history of the NFL, and it also uses the context of the quality of the opponent. So I love PFF, but PFF does not adjust for the quality of the opponent. So when you go up against a really good team, you're probably going to have lower grades. When you go up against a bad team, you're probably going to have higher grades. And so, it tends to balance out over time. But if you have an easier schedule, you probably will end up with higher grades than somebody that had a more difficult schedule. If you play, there were several years ago, I remember, where it was like we had these challenges, right? There was one year where it was like, man, we got to play all the best wide receivers this year. We had Julio and whoever the top guys were, in that year. It's like, oh, man, we got all the tough wide receivers. In that year, your corners might be graded a little lower than normal. Now, you can try to provide that context yourself by just looking at it and saying, okay, well, he's got a 62 grade. However, that's because of 4 low grades, and those 4 were against, Julio and trying to think like 5 years ago who the best wide receivers were. I don't know. Doesn't matter. The other great thing about it is that it looks at things that are situational, because you might, and we're going to look at this a little bit later, looking at DVOA for players. If you go on social media right now, and I'm kind of flipping through, there's a whole bunch of infighting amongst Bears fans about Caleb Williams, and I'm kind of poking the bear a little bit. I'm trying to keep my mouth shut as much as possible, but retweet everything so that they hopefully see it and then go fight with those guys. But Bears fans are just absolutely tearing each other apart. And so there's this post here. I'm kind of skipping ahead because I want to get to Caleb in a minute, which also look at Jordan. But it says, how is Caleb not the most disappointing rookie quarterback of the century? This guy is completely lost, blah, blah, blah. So then they all start fighting. One of the things that will get brought up eventually is that when somebody points out the stats, is that Caleb is a garbage time merchant. Well, think about that for a second. Let's say you are now the associate of the Packernet Podcast. You're my researcher. And I tell you, I want you to help me to discover the context behind this. Caleb is a garbage time merchant. Now, there's 2 ways you can go about that. Number one is you can go to a site. I actually just see here, FTN actually has some really good stuff. I'm really on the verge of paying for it. The thing I don't like is that it's just a fantasy site. So it's quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, and that's it. So if it was every player, whatever. But they have stuff where there's filters in there where you can look at, okay, so how do we quantify garbage time? You could figure that out, and then you could try to find either stats. What would be better is to eliminate those times. So there's only this much time left, and you're losing or winning by this much. In their case, it would be losing by. And you just eliminate that for all players, and then you reevaluate. Or you can just go to DVOA, which is going to look at that anyways, because they look at, let's say it's, 1st and 10 from, your 30, fourth quarter, 8 minutes left, down by 25. Now, if we assume that these instances create more, in other words, you're going to end up getting more yards on this first down than if, it was a close game. What it's going to do is it's going to set a baseline. And rather than saying, on average, you're going to get 5 yards on a pass here, you're going to get 9 yards on a pass. It's still going to quantify how good of a job that they're doing. So you could just go to DVOA, which looks at every single pass and the situation specifically, and then kind of recalibrates based on that. It's obviously not perfect. I've said before, if you were to create a perfect thing, it would be essentially kind of the path we're going down right now, which is AI. This was talked about several years ago where they kind of showed something like this long before we started talking about this AI thing, but it sort of tracked all the players on the field. What you would want to do, and we could absolutely do this now, in fact, the NFL should, because the NFL has proprietary data that all these AI companies cannot get their hands on, and that is video footage of every single game ever. We've got these companies out here, which Google just dropped one. I don't have access to it, but it's incredible. So Sora just dropped. It's a video thing for ChatGPT. It's decent, but whatever. The one that Google just dropped looks like it's 10 times better. But essentially all they're doing is they're studying thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of different videos, and then calculating expected output. So if you give somebody a picture, it's going to say, well, based on this and based on everything we know, here's what's going to happen. Here's the movements. Here's how they look. I want this person's arm to move from left to right. Okay, well, we're going to go into our database of knowledge, and we're going to say, here's what the pixels look like when somebody's arm moves from left to right. What the ultimate sort of DVOA metric would be is to not just contextualize on any given play and then put in sort of a random, well, this is generally how good this team is, and apply it to that particular play, because it's possible a good team, maybe they lost their player in this game, their key pass rusher in this game, or maybe they just played like garbage. Maybe they're just not playing well in this day. You never know. What you would do is you would be able to analyze the play and say, okay, you've got this guy who's, let's say he's a crap defensive tackle on a garbage team. DVOA is going to say, this is you didn't get any yards on this, so you suck, because it's a bad team and you should get 10 yards. But if you have this bad team and bad player on this bad team who on this occasion cuts right through the offensive line and gets in front of that running back's face, the video would analyze it and say your expected yards as a running back essentially are -1, based on watching the output of what everybody around you is doing. But the point is, all that is a much more contextualized version of what DVOA already is. So my perfect vision for what a statistic would be is just a higher quality DVOA. And then again, as far as weighted is concerned, it just, rather than looking at a straight up metric across an entire season, weighted DVOA is a little bit better because it takes further context. It looks at further context, which is that teams evolve over time. So the Lions with Aiden Hutchinson in week 1 are not the Lions today with all the injuries that they've incurred. Now, you can't zoom into exactly this week because then you start looking at just the previous week, and that's 100% of the context, which doesn't make any sense. So what you do is you take the whole season, but you weight it so that more recent weeks are more important than previous weeks, and you kind of look at the trajectory, whatever, and you can kind of see, okay, this is more of an accurate picture of where we're at. So then I think the final piece of the puzzle is the difference between rank and overall DVOA. Now, I've said this before, DVOA is largely a year-to-year thing, so it's hard to 100% compare across seasons. And the reason for that, if that seems confusing, because it was super confusing to me as well, because it's like, well, if you're using a historical data set, why wouldn't it be comparable across seasons? Even the adjusted portion of it, you're adjusting based on what, a percentage of how good this team is? I mean, that's no different than any other season. Plus, that's based on previous seasons anyways, isn't it? That was my initial question and thought, if you even care up to this point. But the reality is they take the baseline and then they start to adjust it as the season goes along to create sort of a 2024 version of the historic baseline. How exactly, I don't really know, but the intention is to make sure that these grades and these the DVOA stat is a 2024 stat, so that when we talk value, we're talking 2024 value. All right. So when we talk rank, it's quite obvious what we're saying. If you're the fourth best team, that means there are 3 teams better than you. The DVOA portion of it is sort of quantifying things. How much better are you than the average 2024 team? And it matters because there's going to be some things that don't super make sense. For example, we may have a significantly higher DVOA in this category as a percentage, but not be ranked as highly. So you can, on one hand, say that this team is better than the 2015 team or whatever, but that doesn't mean you're going to get similar results because there might be even better teams this year than there were in those years. And again, it's not super, direct, as in if you place this team in 2015, it would be that way. The DVOA would change at that point, but it still can kind of quantify, at least in a year-to-year thing, that this team is more dominant in 2024 than this team was in 2014 or whatever, okay? So there you go. What I was hoping to do, and hopefully I did do, is number one, explain exactly what we're talking about when I say DVOA, rather than just this is how good we are. We're the fourth best team. Well, very specifically, here is what I'm saying when I tell you about DVOA. Second of all is to establish value, because I know a lot of people want to go, oh, football isn't played on paper, blah, 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 blah. Yes, that's very brilliant of you. Thank you. Thank you for those incredible insights, as if anybody was claiming that football was played on paper. But to kind of give value to the stats that I'm telling you, to demonstrate to you why that this isn't just some arbitrary nonsense that some guy made up in his basement. This is based on actual data. And it's also, when you look at things like PFF, I'm picking on PFF today, but, again, I like PFF. But there are questions about bias. And I think that it's fair, similar to what I said with the referees, where you might have some implicit bias in the back of your head. I think PFF does a good job of trying to make sure that in every situation there's no gray area, so you know exactly what the grade is supposed to be. But I don't know that, I think it would be impossible to say that there is no gray area, and it's also entirely possible that some of the graders, they might kind of lean a little bit like, I don't know. Just saying it's not impossible. And it would be impossible to have perfect oversight, although they do have oversight. Things like DVOA, or just stats in general, could be adjusted net yards per attempt, it could be EPA per dropback, whatever it is. These things are completely emotionless. The data is what the data is. It's simply like that scene in from The Office where the accountant tells them that they're broke and they can't, not only can they not afford a driver, they can't even afford to continue running their business. And they're like, well, can you run the numbers again? And he's like, it's just a program. There's nothing to run or, crunch the numbers again. He says, okay. And he just pushes enter and crunch, right? He's not coming up with his opinion. It's just data. It's math. You put the data into the formula, into the calculator, you push run, and it gives you an output, and that's it. So, with that baseline set, why don't we take a break, and I want to come back and elaborate on what I said yesterday. When we look at DVOA, when we look at this team and compare it to other teams, what exactly is this team? Is it fair to say that they're struggling, not good, they are good, they're great, they're one of the best, not super great, whatever? We're going to look at it. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. All right. So this is going to be fun. This is going to be a good day, unless you're hell-bent on being a negative Packers fan, and then I hate to say I'd encourage you to turn the show off, but if you're determined to be negative, rather than hate listening, just go watch TV. Turn this off. All right, so I don't even know. I hate to begin with some of the best news, but I don't know necessarily a better way to do this. Why don't we look at the team overall? And again, all of this is weighted, right? So it's weighted DVOA, weighted offensive, all that stuff is weighted. If we look at the highest graded teams, this goes back to 74, I think. 1979 is as far back as we can go. So I can't show you the team from the 60s or anything like that. The best team via DVOA was 1997. That is to say, the most dominant team or furthest from average team. 1997, the DVOA was 38.7. The second most dominant team is the team that I've been saying all along was the team that absolutely got the most robbed. That was 2009. Should have won a Super Bowl. Fluky frickin' Cardinals game. They missed a penalty, etc., etc. We should have won back-to-back Super Bowls. Anyways, after that, not super surprisingly, is 1996 with a 32.2. So if I didn't say it, 2009 was 35.4. 1996 was 32.2. Do you know what the next best team is? 2024. Better than 2010, 2011, and 2020. In fact, it's almost tied with 2020, but it is slightly higher. 31.5. 2020 was 31.4. After that is not 2010. It is not 2011. It's not 2016. It's 2014. 26.5. After that is 2003, 22.6. 2012, 22.1. Then 2021, 21.3. Then 2011, remember, bad defense. Then 2007, then 1995, then 2010. The rank generally does follow. So the three top teams, 1997, 2009, and 1996, they were the number one team via DVOA all 3 years. The next 2024 and 2020, both teams were third. So very similar to 2020, which I stand by. Should have won the Super Bowl that year also, but, things didn't quite pan out. So there isn't much to go through other than to say, again, only 3 teams had a better situation in terms of rank, and that is to say they were number one. We've never been number 2, which is weird. 1996, 2009, and 1997, no teams were considered better than the Green Bay Packers. That's it. We are in the same situation as 2024. Everything else was worse. 2010, the Packers were ranked 6th, which is to say there were 5 teams deemed to be better than the Green Bay Packers. Still went on to win. Which again, if I may, come back to another talking point that I've been saying for years. It's not always about being the best team. You can be the best team and lose. All right? GM's job is to make a good team. The GM and the head coach combine to make a good team. I'm so sorry to tell the negative fans. This is a very good freaking team. So historically speaking, in most of our lifetimes, in my lifetime, I was born mid-'80s, so this encompasses all of my life. This is roughly, potentially, arguably, the 4th best Packers team we've ever watched. Better than most of the teams that we remember as being very, very good. 2016, 2020, 2012, 2011, 2010, better than those teams, at least more dominant compared to the rest of the league. And this, by the way, this is also where my frustration comes in. Not that I don't fully understand it, because it's been a weird year, and even I am sitting back going, this doesn't feel like it, but it is what it is. But part of my frustration is the fact that no Packer fan in 2011 would have doubted the 2011 Packers. No Packer fan in 2012 would have doubted the 2012 Packers. Nobody in 2014, nobody in 2016, nobody in 2020. We knew we were very good. We expected to win, and we were all on board. Let's go. Let's rock and roll. 2021, largely the same thing. Bro, we're ready to go. We're a good freaking team. We're going to smash everybody. If you go up against a top team, it's like, this will be tough, but I think we can do it. That's just not how it feels this year, and I don't know why. And again, it probably is largely because it's very different. I've been saying it's not a passing-focused team, which is true, but that's not to be mistaken for not a good passing team. We'll get there. The season's wrapping up, man. We don't have much time until this season is over. And again, we're probably not going to win the Super Bowl, so we have a very limited window to get excited about one of the best Green Bay Packers teams we've watched in our lifetime. It's time to start getting excited about it. Now, watch as we lose to the frickin' Saints. Weighted offense. If we look at just overall, in other words, where do we rank compared to the rest of the league? 2020 and 2014 were the most promising years because there were no teams better than the Packers. Those two years, we had the best offenses. Shockingly, in 2011, they were second. Same with 2021. I don't know who the heck was better in 2011. That's crazy talk. Although maybe running had part to do with it. They weren't a great rushing team. I don't know, but that's crazy stuff. And then the Packers ranked third in 1997, 2024 this year, 2012, and 1995. So that's where we're keeping company. By the way, 1996, they ranked fourth. And in 2010, they ranked seventh. If we look, however, at weighted offensive DVOA, how much more dominant than average, right? So ranking is how many teams are better than us. And unfortunately, there are very good teams this frickin' year. The Baltimore Ravens, I don't understand the Ravens. I got to go back and look closely at the Ravens. They're an AFC team, so I shouldn't have to. But it's like, how is your record the way that it is? First of all, Lamar Jackson should be MVP. I'm looking at his DVOA. It's earth-shatteringly high. And their passing DVOA is psycho. I don't know what's going on over there. Anyways, I have to watch some of those games. The best offense in terms of most dominant from the center, 2011 was number one. Not surprising. That offense shredded everybody. By the way, I forgot to mention, Bruce, when I said people are saying the same stuff as I'm saying, I wasn't talking about you. I didn't even see your thing yet. I'm not claiming Bruce to steal. I was talking about somebody else. Don't worry about it. Just saw your message on the Twitters. All right, 2011, 2020, 2014. Those are the three highest offenses, 28.5, 26.9, 26.1. Then 1995, 2009, 2021, 1997, and then 2024. Now, that might not seem shockingly good, but let me put that into slightly further context. First of all, 2011 was kind of in a class of its own, 28.5. Then there's sort of a second tier, which is 2020 and 2014, two incredibly good offensive years. Both of those offenses ranked number one at the time, 26.9, 26.1. After that, it's kind of another group. 95 was kind of by itself at 23. 2009 was 22.7. And then you got two exactly the same, 2021 and 1997, 21.5. 2024 is 21.3. So it's kind of on like a third tier. And again, to illustrate how much further away from the rest that it really is, that we are the third ranked offense this year. That's the same as 2009, who kind of got a little bit screwed, as did 2011, by the way. I was wrong. I said it was second ranked. Weighted, that was not weighted. Weighted, they were actually third. So very, very good offenses in 2011 and 2009, apparently. 2 years that we got kind of screwed. And 2020, we got screwed. We got screwed, and screwed. All right, but here's something that's even more fun. We talked about how this is more of like a running team, blah, blah, blah. If we look at DVOA for passing, the number one passing team via DVOA was 2011, and it was a shockingly high number. Very, very, very good passing team. I'm sure we all remember that. 62.5% better than average, which is crazy. By the way, I believe the Ravens right now are like 74 or 75. What is happening over there? Second best passing team. Green Bay Packers since 1979 is 2024. 47.7. 2020 was 47.4. 2014 was 47.2. These 3 years you're looking at here are essentially saying about the same in terms of passing, how much better than average you are. That's crazy. By the way, all of the top four, the teams were the number one passing team, except this year the Packers are third. That's just how unbelievably good at least two other teams are. I believe it's Baltimore and Buffalo. Why don't I just look, for crying out loud? Yeah. Baltimore 72.5, which is better than any Packers team has ever been. 2011, again, we were in the 60s. They're 72, which is shocking. Buffalo at 52.4, which would be the second best Green Bay Packers passing offense. Nuts. Green Bay Packers, second best passing season we've had. Again, quantifying it as better than average for this season. But still, 47.7%, and we rank third. Meaning super, super dominant. We should be proud of it, but also, dang it, we got some good competition here. Then we got running the ball. Now, running the ball is tough. It doesn't generally do very well. If you look at EPA, generally you're negative. If you look at DVOA, you're generally negative. It's a tough thing to nail. There are only, let me see, especially for the Green Bay Packers, 12 teams in the 46, 12 of the 46 teams that are positive. In order of the best rushing attacks, 2003 had a DVOA of 13.9. That is by far a season unto itself. That was the year we had Amon Green, who had 335 attempts for 1,883 yards and 15 touchdowns. He ran for 5.3 yards per attempt. So that was, as far as the Green Bay Packers go in my lifetime, that was as good as it got. After that was 1997. In 1997, we had Dorsey Levens run for 1,437 yards, 7 touchdowns on 329 attempts, 4.4 yards per attempt. The third best is 2024. Just to put that into context, I didn't mention a single Aaron Jones season. In fact, after 2024 is 1984, and then prior to that was 2022. Third best Green Bay Packers rushing offense, better than any season we had ever with Aaron Jones, who is an absolute legend in Green Bay. And yes, part of the issue is that we put him on a snap count, which is part of the problem with a guy like Aaron Jones. He's like a Jahmyr Gibbs or whatever. You don't really want 25 carries on the guy. That's why you go get a Josh Jacobs. And what happens when you do? You have one of your best seasons running ever. The Green Bay Packers rushing attack, however, despite being historically good for the Green Bay Packers, ranks 5th behind Philly, Buffalo, Detroit, and Baltimore. Now, keep in mind, Detroit did lose Montgomery, which could end up hurting them. Baltimore is probably going to remain a pretty good team. By the way, this is not weighted. They don't, that I can find anywhere, they don't have weighted passing, weighted rushing. When you get this granular, they don't do weighted. So keep that in mind. I don't know that the Packers have necessarily gotten much better over the season. I think they've been fairly good throughout, but it's entirely possible that they have possibly been better over the years. I don't really know. Baltimore Ravens DVOA for rushing right now is 16.8. That's better than any Packers team in the history of DVOA. So there you go. Ravens passing and rushing better than any Packers team. So that's super exciting. So second best passing team, third best rushing team. There you go. Why don't we take a break? We've got defense and special teams. And I also want to kind of narrow down some of the Packers teams to see how many are actually similar to what we've got this year. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. So the Packers have had some good defenses, believe it or not. As far as above average defenses, remember negative is positive, there are 28 out of 46. So half have been, call it, good defenses. But looking at the top defenses of freaking course, as far as weighted defense, the best defense, it's not the 90s defenses, it's 2009. Makes me sick. 2009 weighted defense was negative 19.6. After that was 97, and after that was 96, not surprisingly. Then you get 2010. So this is where I've said before, if you really look at winning championships, it comes down to defense. You got the 96, 97, 2009, 2010. You got 2 Super Bowls, and you got 2 should-have-been Super Bowls. After that is 2002, pretty bad offensive year. Then 2003, that would be an interesting one to look into. I don't fully remember, but if you're looking at like shoulda, coulda, woulda, coulda, shoulda been, there's that. 1982, 2006, 2020, 2001, and then 2024. Packers are at a negative 8.1. 2001 and 2020, almost identical. 2020, both of those were 8.2. So we're at 8.1, 8.2, exact same thing, basically. Packers defense right now, as I've mentioned before, ranks 6th in the NFL. Obviously, this is somewhat unusual. There have only been 5 years where our defense has ranked higher. That's it. In 2002, we had the 4th best defense. In 2010, we had the 3rd best defense. In 2009, we had the 2nd best defense. And then 96 and 97, the Packers had the number 1 defense. So even based on rank, you got 97, 96, 2009, 2010. Those are Super Bowls right there. Again, if we look at offense, you got 2011, 2020, 2014, 1995, 2009, 1997. I mean, these are the high-flying, like these are the years we remember. These are fun. 2011, 2020, all that stuff, all the, it's good. It's a good time. It's about the defense. The Packers having the 6th best defense are tied with 1993 and 2006. In 2020, remember, it was similarly a good defense, but they ranked 8th. So there were 7 better defenses. Now we have only 5 this year, defenses that are better than ours. Looking specifically at pass defense, and remember, these are not weighted, so some of these are not going to be as massively impressive, I suppose. But it is negative 0.5. So just about average. 1998 was exactly average at 0. As far as team history, it ranks 22nd. Not shockingly impressive. A lot of actual 80s teams mixed in here, believe it or not. As far as recent memory, 2021 we ranked 16th. 2019 was 15th. 2020 was 12th. 2010 was 4th. So there you go with the Super Bowl year. 1996 was our top. Now, as far as rankings go, though, the Green Bay Packers are ranked 9th, still inside of the top 10. And again, if this was weighted, I know it would be even higher, but still, the 9th best pass defense, which is ranked 15th historically. 1996 was the only time they ever ranked number 1 in pass defense. 2002, 1997, 2010, they ranked 2nd. But then when we get to run defense is when the Packers start to rank a little bit higher. Probably, again, not as high as they should be, but where did it go? Run defense, negative 15.2. Run defense. Negative is positive. The teams that had better run defenses, 2016, 2017, 94, 82, 98, and then 2009. 2009 being the best run defense, negative 23.4. Packers run defense right now ranks 8th. It is the 6th best rank that we've had in run defense, tied with 1996, believe it or not. 2017 and 2003, we ranked 6th. In 94, we ranked 5th. In 82, we had the 4th best run defense. And then 2009, number 1 ranked run defense in the NFL. Oh, it makes me so sad. All right, and then we get to special teams. This is also pretty exciting stuff. Very much overlooked, but pretty exciting. If we look at the weighted, and this is weighted, special teams ranks here, the Green Bay Packers are positive, which is fantastic. There are only 22 special teams that have been positive. Our special teams have been worse than our defense from that perspective. As far as having a 1% better than average or higher, there are only 16. Right now, the Green Bay Packers are sitting at 2.2%. That is the 8th best special teams since 1979. 1990, 2001, 98, 07, 2011, 2000, and 1996. So the most recent team that actually had a better special teams than us was 2011. Prior to that was 07, and then 2000 and 2001. So there have been 4 teams since 2000 that have been better than this special teams unit. Gets even better when you look at special teams rank. Kind of interesting, actually. So in 1996, they actually had the number one special teams in the NFL. We rank 6th right now in weighted special teams. It's the second best special teams we've had. We have historically struggled with special teams. Only 7 times have we been in the top 10 in special teams. Out of 46, 7 times we've been in the top 10. Once have we been in the top 5, and it was 1996, and that's it. Had we had McManus the entire year, yes, it's still weighted, but still, it would have been, whatever. Maybe we would have cracked the top 5. Maybe we'll even get there. We got a few more weeks yet. If we can perform at a solid level, we might be the second team ever to be a top 5 special teams unit. Ay. But that's pretty impressive. Despite not even being as good as 5 or 6 other teams, we still rank higher than everybody else. So, incredibly talented football team in the league and ranks of all the best teams. I made a claim, though, yesterday about being one of the most well-rounded teams and whatnot. I want to look at that. And I want to look at, because the Packers are top 10 in every category, how many teams have been top 10 in every category? So first of all, there are 20 teams over that time period that ranked in the top 10 in DVOA overall. One of those teams was not in the top 10 in overall weighted offense. That was 1993. 2 additional teams did not have a top 10 passing offense. That would be 1992 and 1984. If we look at rushing offense, we can knock off a ton. There are 2007, 2012, 2011, 2016, 1994, 2001, 1995, 1998, and 2010. That leaves us with 8 remaining. We haven't even got the defense yet. If we look at only top 10 defenses, we can eliminate 2021 and 2014. We are down to 6 remaining teams. All of those were top 10 in pass defense, with 2003 being just making the cut at 10. However, we can cut out 2 more when it comes to run defense. 1997 and 2020 don't make the cut for run defense, with 2020 being 18th. There are now just 4 teams left: 96, 2024, 2003, and 2009. And then finally, special teams. 2009, we had the worst special teams in the NFL, ranking 32nd. They don't make the cut. And in 2003, they ranked 13th, so they don't make the cut. That leaves just 2 teams, 1996 and 2024. These are the only 2 Packers teams since 1979 to be top 10 in every single category across the board. Overall DVOA, we are currently 3rd. 1996, they were number 1. Offensively, we're 3rd. They were 9th. Passing offense, we're 3rd. They were 4th. Rushing, we're 5th. They were 10th. Defense, we're 6th. They were number 1. Pass defense, we're 9th. They're number 1. Run defense, we're 8th. They were 10th. Just made the cut. Special teams, we are 6th. They were number 1. That's it. That's the entire list. So if we may circle back ever so briefly to the idea that perhaps the negative fans are a little off base and that they are spending way too much time focusing on some of the negatives, because there are negatives. There are always negatives. There were negatives in 1996. There were negatives in 2010. There were negatives in 2011, 2012, 2014, 2015, 2020, 2019, 2021, 97, 95, 93. They all had negatives. Every single one of them. And the next time we win the Super Bowl, whether that's this year or 40 years from now, that team is going to have negatives. It's going to have problems. And negative fans will be complaining about that Super Bowl team the entire season up until they win the Super Bowl. But what I am telling you is that for the first time since 1996, we finally have the team that we've all been begging for. We finally have, believe it or not, a defense. Not only do we have run defense, we have a defense overall. Run defense, pass defense, all of it. We have an offense that is balanced. We can pass and we can run. And we have a top 10 special teams unit. In fact, in 5 of the 8 categories, the Packers are top 5. That was same with 1996, 5 of 8 categories. We're outside of the top 5 in defense, overall, pass defense, and run defense. Those are the 3 categories. 96, they were out of the top 5 in offense, and rushing defense. We have a slightly better offense than 96. They have a slightly better defense and special teams. That's where we are right now. I do have some stuff as far as player DVOA, but I feel like this is a pretty solid mic drop moment to just kind of walk away from. So I think I'm going to stop while I'm ahead and leave it at that. You all have a good rest of your day. I will talk to you tonight, tomorrow, whatever. Have a good one. Goodbye.